Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to That Christian Nerd channel. In today's live stream, I am going to be interviewing a professor on the topic of Black Christians engaging in politics. But before we do that, I want to mention a couple things that I've been working on throughout this month. So, firstly, I have a ton of articles that I'm writing for Black History Month. So, I would encourage you to go to my link tree and go check out either my Medium account or the Followers of the Shepherd.org account, where I post Christian content and other sort of articles as well. I've written a number of things, so that might be cool for you to check out. Also, I plan on making a video discussing whether or not Jesus is black, what that means, how that's relevant, if that's relevant at all, and those sorts of questions. So if you're interested in that kind of work, that should come out next week, hopefully. So be on the lookout for that. And I would encourage you to check out my video discussing African American spirituality that I posted online on my YouTube channel. And there is a article you can read as well if you do not want to watch the video. So I would encourage you to check all of those things out. But that will be all of the announcements from me for now. So let me go ahead and introduce my guest. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How you doing, my brother?
I'm good. I'm good. So, first question: how has the Black Church historically understood political engagement different from white Christians in America, or is it that much different?
Well, that's a good question. There's actually three things. One is that for political engagement, um, the difference between Black Christians and white Christians, the Black church versus white Christians and the white church, is that political engagement is essential. It's not optional, and it's that way because there's no real. And I'll give a little detail that a lot of people don't know today, but at the end, but the uh, white Christians have the luxury of having other people take care of their basic needs for them, meaning they're living in the same neighborhoods that the city council lives in. The city council is thinking about their neighborhoods first when they do, or the state, or even the federal level. They're thinking of their needs in particular when they craft policies, when they make laws, when they enforce laws, and so forth. And so for the Black church, there's been no one to do that. Right? The Black church was born in Africa, but also here in under the conditions of slavery, and it was born of a necessity because of racial discrimination. So all of these laws, everything from slavery laws to segregation laws to anti-voting laws to the Fugitive Slave Act, and the Dred Scott decision, and all of those things were were basically a system that, and even uneven enforcement, um, Jim Crow, those were systems that were put in place specifically to um, hurt Black people as a community, and to advantage white people and white Christians as a community. So it's been essential for us to do that because the Black church has been the one institution that we've had to be able to fight this and to advocate for what God has given us as Imago Dei, being equally in the image of God as anyone else, therefore having the same rights and the same should have the same privileges in society and enjoy the same benefits as anyone else has. So the white people, white people in the government who are not Christians are still taking care of those neighborhoods where white Christians live, because white Christians, there are no separate white Christian neighborhoods and white secular neighborhoods, right? So they're doing that already by default, and people take care of themselves, their community, their families, their schools, their neighborhoods, and so forth. And so they're not taking care of of ours, and so we've had to be the voice. The Black church has been the voice to actually make that happen. So it's been essential versus optional. Now, with that, um, a lot of white Christians might be surprised and feel that, because of all the political um, engagement from white Christians today, that what's essential for us too. We're standing up for this, that, or the other thing, whatever they feel they're standing up for. But that's a very historically recent phenomenon. White Christians with white church and was not really engaged politically in any um, meaningful way as a force in and of its own. I mean, there's been white Christians as individuals that have been mayors and this kind of thing, but in terms of being the white church being a force in politics, that only happened in like in the 1980s with the advent of Ronald Reagan and with Jerry Falwell's what he called the moral majority. Right before that, even with abortion, white Christians and I remember this as a kid. I would talk to them, and I wasn't even a Christian back then, and they would say, that's a social issue, and so forth, right? But now it's, and then Jerry Falwell came and started to say, well, he pointed out that 70% of aborted babies were white. And so then right after that, not long after that, that's when abortion became the major issue, the major moral issue of our time. So, and that's when the engagement started again. And when Japanese cars started overtaking American industry, when the American hegemony was threatened, that's really when white Christians, and this was in the 80s, like the late 70s, early to mid 80s, that was when white Christians started becoming a political force. And so before that, they were really not that much engaged. But that is as a church, right? As a church voice, individually, yes, politically, yes, but as a church body, no. And so, but with the Black church, it's always been essential for the Black church to engage in politics, or things wouldn't have happened at all, because it's the only institution that we had that could really push for something, and we had the power of Christ behind us, because the cause was right. Right, slavery was wrong, Jim Crow was wrong, and so discrimination in housing and other areas was wrong, not voting was wrong. So we had the power of God and the power of our faith, but it's been essential. And so in that sense, it's also been for survival and not for comfort. So that would be the second reason. And then three, it's the Black church and the Black community as a whole tends to be communal rather than individual, right? We really refer to each other as brothers and sisters, and sort of mean that, and adopt each other, and have these sort of extended families adopting each other as you're my son, you're my daughter, you're my mom, you're my dad, right? And you have this extended. In one church, I had 5 mothers, right? And they all adopt me, right? So I had more mothers than than I had entire family, and so of biological family. So that really does, and that communalism, and a lot of it was forced, but it was no, it wasn't forced. It was more exacerbated. It was refined and pressurized, because again, like I was sharing in our previous discussion, shared with you in a previous discussion, coming from Africa, African societies are more communally based, right? It's the idea that we cannot exist without the others, so it's not, we're not atoms, we're molecules, and that type of structure survived, and actually was reinforced as just as a survival mechanism. And so the whole communal bent of the Black church is different. And that communal bent part of the driving force with the faith in Christ, of course, and the teachings of the Bible. That communal leaning is we're looking out for each other, and that's the engagement that we have.
Gotcha. What biblical themes would you say most shape Black Christian political thought?
The number one is the to love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's something that the Black church has lived better. It's not perfect, not trying to say the Black church is perfect and everybody else is wrong. No, but the Black church in our imperfection, has lived that truth or that teaching of from God better as a whole than any other church. Meaning that because um, the Black church has always stood up for the rights of everyone, and for everyone to be treated equally, for everyone to have the same rights, and for in the same privileges, and for everyone to be treated fairly and humanely and decently. And other traditions, the white church in particular, which was unfortunately, got involved in and was actually the spearhead for slavery and Jim Crow. There were some exceptions, but really this mostly come from white Christians, the Ku Klux Klan burning crosses and things, and segregationist preachers. So they've looked out for themselves, and this has been also true for, but not for Black people. And this has also been true, and there's some exceptions, right? But overall, that's been the case, and that's historically, I think, kind of indisputable, unfortunately. But the same thing has happened with other ethnicities of Christians. They may look out for themselves in terms of they're being mistreated as well, like Latino or Indian or Asian. They may look out for that, like, and say, hey, wait, stop treating us this way. But they are not looking out for Black people, right? They're looking out for themselves, or maybe for everyone in a generic sense, but they're not looking out for Black people. And whereas Black people have been, the Black church has been looking out for everybody. So that's one, is to live that commandment of Jesus overall as a whole, with the most fidelity of any ethnic group as a whole. There's always individual exceptions. Another thing is that Black versus white Christians in particular, white Christians have seen this as the promised land, right? As the new Canaan. There's actually like New Canaan, Connecticut, right?
Like the United States specifically?
Yes, America, the Americas, right?
Hmm.
In the United States specifically. That's why you have these places in, like New Canaan in Connecticut, or in Northeast. You have places that are named after the exact same places in England, and then others, that are the new. And there was this, and especially with the Puritans, what are called the Puritans. They had this idea that there was that this land was Canaan, and that these people who lived here already really weren't even people. They were like the Canaanites, and we had this command from God to throw them out, and all of this, right? And that's what they did, and so to dispossess them. So it's been, but even after that was over, after all of that that horrific slaughter and bloodshed was over, because there were nobody left to do that, to kill. So even then, there's been this sort of cornucopia, the land of plenty type of, this land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, all these songs and things and themes and thinking. So it's been really sort of a promised land for the white Christians. For Black Christians, it's been seen more as Egypt, right? Being under Pharaoh, you know, wade in the water, steal away, steal away. Someday I'm going home, right? It's been a situation where it's been so harsh and deprived in many ways, and oppressed, from the Bible's definition of oppression, uh, that it's been Egypt, and that our promised land as a whole, as a church, has been in heaven and not here on this earth, right? So that's been the whole idea of the hope for the future, and the and then trying to get some of that hope realized in this life, right? That's been a driving force, right? To break the bondage of Egypt, and not to escape and to leave, but to break the bondage to be able to participate more fully and more equitably in society. So that's another one. And that's another thing, is that, and that's really I'd say that all the points that I had about this is to discuss is that's really the two main themes, right? That love the Lord your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, love the Lord with your whole strength, love your neighbor as yourself, and then seeing this as a promised land, and as hope for the future, rather than being the promised land here, to try to change this from Egypt to a promised land.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So obviously, we have bipartisan politics here in the United States. A lot of people are tired of that. I'm personally am tired of the dichotomy, the one or the other, and how that gets played out. So, how can we, as a Black church, pursue justice without getting tied to one single political party? Or has the Black church been tied to a political party in the way that, like, the white church is sometimes seen as being tied to a single political party?
Uh, that's a really good question, and the answer is sort of, and the basic answer to the first part is to see life as God sees life, to see human interactions in society as God sees society, which means that to be an issue by issue Christian and not a platform Christian, not a political party Christian, because all of the political parties and all the political platforms are a mixture of good and evil, of righteousness and sin in God's sight, right? So the way that God treats people and the way He's treated Israel and the way He treats societies is, or even churches, is on an issue by issue basis. So when we look at, for instance, Revelation chapter 2, where Jesus Christ is evaluating the churches of Asia Minor, He's giving each one of them the pros and cons, the good and the bad, the compliments and the critiques and the criticisms for the way they behave on an issue by issue basis. So overall, you're doing well, but you've left your first love, right? You are, you're in danger, but you you have this going in your favor, that you hate the works of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate, right? So Jesus is doing that type of evaluation all the time, and he's doing it. He doesn't look at a body and just says, or a people or a society, and say, well, look, everything's great or everything's bad, right? Until they really go to one extreme or another. But but so the way to do it is to look at each of the political parties and what is the range of things that they have in their platform, and agree with the good ones and disagree with the bad ones. So in general, what happens is that on like the political right wing, which most white Christians identify with, about 80% of white Christians voted for Donald Trump all three times, is that, but on that wing, there is they're consistent with the Bible. There are things like, um, you know, devotion to hard work, or which the Black church has embodied. By the way, that's something that I missed in my answer before. Honesty, that the Black church has embodied that, and then also uh, things like respect for unborn life, or traditional family values in the sense of sexual morality, for instance. And traditional family values are kind of a mushy term, but basically, like say, sexual morality, right? That you have, you know. So, for instance, so those things are good, but the social justice and the contempt for others, the racial prejudice that's been endemic since the colonial days. All those things are wrong. So we can't, or this whole the thing of it, like say, or just say with this current ICE thing that's going on, to have some sort of citizen, border enforcement is fine. It didn't exist in the Bible days, but and it's a bit hypocritical because we're on stolen land and we're trying to keep others out. But at least, and again, they don't necessarily want to allow completely open borders, but to chase people down in churches, to rip children away from their mothers and dads, to imprison 5-year-old children like ICE is doing now, or to kill people just at a whim. Those sorts of things are wrong. So it is the any Christian's duty, responsibility, and expectation to stand up against those things, and to stand for the things that are right and against the things that are wrong. Now, on the what's called the political left, it's the kind of the flip side, is that the social justice is overall very strong, at least in terms of the positions, not always in the execution, but the the focus on social justice is something that is very, very consistent with the Bible. There's a lot about the Bible about social justice, especially in the Old Testament. But the things like the abortion, homosexuality, and sexual license or whatever, those things are not consistent with the Bible. So support the ones that are, and oppose the ones that aren't, or take issue with the ones that aren't, and on an issue by issue basis. Because one of the Satan's most effective strategy is half truth. So if he can mix some lie in with the truth, or mix some truth in with a lie, that's when he deceives people. And that's how you get these party devotee types. And that's really not, that are willing to really look over anything because this is my party or my candidate or my this or that. So those sorts of things, that's the way to approach it. Now, the way that the Black church has approached it as a whole is a pragmatic choice of the lesser of two evils. So that used to be the Republican Party back in pre-slavery times, but there wasn't a lot of love for the Republican Party, the Abraham Lincoln's Republican Party, either, because they really didn't want to abolish slavery. They wanted to keep the Union together. So that was one thing. But over time, now those people, the people in, like the Southern Democrat Party that were supporting slavery, they moved over to well, it started with FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, and he was kinder to Black people than other people. So than other candidates were. So there are a lot of Black people joined in the North, joined the Democratic Party. Then in the South, once Jim Crow was officially ended, Black people started joining the Republican Party in the South. I mean, the Democratic Party in the South. And so there were the Democrats, the Southern Democrats, the Dixiecrats jumped to the Republican Party, first by voting patterns, then for actual membership. So that's that's been awareness in the Black church. And so it's more like there are Democrat hard, I'm a Democrat types, like the football team type of, but most of it is pragmatism, realizing that neither party is really primarily in our favor. The Democratic Party in Kennedy's and Johnson's day used to be, but that's changed since like the Me generation started. But it's a pragmatic realization that, if you can't, like for me personally, I'm not a member of a party, but in terms of voting, I can't fight for the unborn if I'm in prison or on a slave plantation somewhere. Mm-hmm. Right. I can't, or if I'm stripped of my ability to get a good job, I have limited resources and limited, my voice is much more limited to fight for those things. So that's really representative of a lot of the Black church. And there was in the first, like when Trump and Hillary Clinton were running, for instance, I pointed out to one sister, and she said this beautifully. I said, well, Hillary's almost kind of like a terminal cancer, because some of the things she was saying, but in retrospect, I almost regret saying that. But she said, yeah, but Trump's like getting shot in the head. Right. She didn't disagree with me, right? But she put it in a much better context. And this is the context that the Black church has had overall. It's like, it's a pragmatic realization that there are some parties that are just less bad to us, that are less thoughtless about us and less hostile towards us. And that's really the pragmatism of Black church politics. And of course, you're going to find these diehard, Democrats, and then a minority of diehard Republicans, a smaller number. But in the middle, the large portion there is really, it's more of a pragmatic realization. And whichever party actually represents the interests of the Black community better or is less hostile, that's the party that many, that most Black people are going to vote for if they have a track record, not just talking about it, but actually doing it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's very understandable. And I think that's a great point that you make, right? You can't, if a party's going to strip resources away from you that would allow you to do these other things politically, that you feel is right, then you should maybe vote for the other party so that you can continue doing those
Right.
other things. That's a interesting point there.
Yeah, because a lot of people that are like black people, like I said, I've never joined a party, but and I used to try to vote a split ticket. It's been harder to do since the MAGA regime and QAnon and these sorts of things. But I still look for them. But it's when you're empowered, you can fight to change where you are, right? You can push to change where you are. So if for the black people that are Democrats, that most black church members are Democrats for the reasons I stated, not because they just love everything about the Democratic Party. They can push as empowered members of the party to change some of these things about that are less aligned with what the Bible teaches, right, and less aligned with the overall morality of the black community and the black church. So, but if you're, like I said, if you're banned from getting a job, you can't get on the bus, you can't, or you're legally able to get a job, but things like happen, like with me, like I graduated from Berkeley and Stanford, and I went to and I had an MBA from Stanford, and I would go into a job one time, or a couple times actually, and the guy was like looking at my resume, smiling. It was for a job interview. He looked up and saw me, and he looked like his worst enemy walked in. His face completely changed, right? And there was no way he was going to hire me, and he didn't. And the interview was very hostile. And there's patterns about people. They look at you. In fact, one of my professors at Berkeley was black, and he was a film critic. This was for a film class, black film class, and he said that people used to compliment him how great his articles were and his critiques in this, and then when they saw him, all of a sudden they started finding these like things to nitpick about and that kind of thing. And
Mm,
so that's a pattern in society. That's not just isolated incidents. This is way a lot of people actually think. And so if you're allowing that to become the norm again officially, which is what this particular administration, the current administration, is trying to do, and you try to disempower and disenfranchise people, then there's no resources or far less ability to fight for these other things. You're absolutely right.
gotcha. So, uh, I was curious about this. So, a lot of Christians are deeply disappointed in like Christian engagement in politics. A lot of what they're seeing is the way that white Christians are engaging politically. So, how would you encourage or pastor someone who's feeling that intense disappointment, disillusionment to where like it's affecting their faith? And how might the black church think about that, wrestle with that disappointment?
It's for it depends on who's asking, but if it's for much of the black church, um, this is what life has always been for us. So when and I'm not trying to be snide with people, but a lot of times, sometimes it is a little snide, but most of the time it's kind of a wake up call to try to help people understand that what's going on now uh, with the ICE and the killings and the raids and all of this stuff. Welcome to Black America. This is what it's always been for us, right? And
I did
yeah,
see a lot of videos that were saying that like, "Oh, you're just now like you think America's just now losing its mind because of specifically because Alex Predio, straight
yeah,
white dude, died.
yeah,
This is how it's always been. Like
yeah,
you're just realizing it now." Yeah. Go
right.
ahead.
It's been this way for us
Mhm.
ever since 1640 with the John Punch trial that made a black man, for two whites, one black, for the same offense. The white offenders got whipped and released and had their indentured servitude extended a little. The black man got whipped and made a perpetual slave forever for the rest of his natural life. And that dichotomy, uh, ever since then, what ICE is doing out there, that has been the daily experience of the black community. That has been the daily experience of many people in the Black church. Right? People don't, white Christians seem to have the idea sometimes that that they just love all Christians, but the fact is that when a Black person walks in, they get this suspicious look, or they just don't hire them or whatever. There's 70% chance that that was a Christian to whom you treated that way. If you look at the like Pew Research and the Public Religion Research Institute, these studies, about about 70, almost 75% of Black people in America identify as Christians. So all of these things that were done, and it was even higher before the secularization started happening over the past several decades. So when people were doing this, when you see these lynchings, when you see the slave plantations, all of that, these were white Christians doing this to Black Christians. Yeah. This was happening to Christians. This was Christian persecution. It wasn't called that, and it wasn't explicitly framed as being religious just because you believe in Christ. But that's really what it was. It was the devil's people oppressing God's people, and that's the but for the Black community, like the Rodney King, for instance, like you got beaten up and 10 police officers beat him where he couldn't walk anymore. I mean, these are or the unjust arrests, or all of these people that you see released from prison that were framed in Chicago and other places, or Miami, planting evidence on people and shooting them. Thousands of false arrests in Los Angeles. This sorts of that were later overturned. But and this is just by 2 police officers. There were many more across. So this is not new to the Black community. This is something that we've had to face. Like white people don't have to have the talk, right? Which means like you've got to tell your kids, especially boys, here's how you handle a police situation to avoid getting killed, right? White people don't have to do that. And now they're getting to a point with these ICE agents that they have to do that too.
Yeah.
So it's so that's what's going on. And so I would say really as a whole, look to the for white people, I would say look to Black Christians, look to the Black church to see how we've survived it, and survived much worse than this, actually, much worse. And then for Black Christians, I would say look to your history and look to how we've come, and we say this in our church every Sunday. Look, God brought us this far. We're still here. They've tried this in the past. We're still here. They've done all of these things. We've still prospered, through the grace of Jesus Christ. And so keep a close eye on our history. And then also for either Christians, Black Christians, white Christians, whoever, realize that this world is not our home, and that we have to fight for everybody. And white Christians should start doing that. They're still not doing that. So we need to fight for everybody, or we're going to lose everybody. Everybody, because God is not mocked, right? God. One of my favorite verses actually is in Proverbs. It says, it's so appropriate to this situation. It says, "He that stops his ears at the cry of the poor shall cry himself, but will not be heard." And that's what happened. That's what's happening to many white people now. Latino people who didn't care much about Black people, wanted to identify with white people, and voted with white people for Donald Trump. And now this is or really, it wasn't so much for Donald Trump. It was more against us, because he really had a target for Black people. And so this sort of thing, we need to come out of this. We need to come out of the people need to care about, white Christians need to learn how to care about Black Christians in a sacrificial way, the same way that they care about their own, like Paul said in Philippians chapter 2. Don't think just on your own things, think of the things of others. So collectively, white Christians need to learn to care about Black Christians, and in a realistic way, and not just excuse what they do, and not just dismiss everything that thought, be it like Black Lives Matter, or critical race theory, or before that, civil rights, right? And before that, abolition, is to take us seriously as brothers and sisters in Christ, because after a point, God is going to he's going to bring those same things onto the people who don't care.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's a great Great segue into our final question. What do you think that white Christians can learn from Black Christian political engagement? For me personally, I think shifting from, like you talked about earlier, this is the promised land to this is Egypt
Mhm.
could be so helpful. Like you wouldn't have to, I don't think a white Christian would have to go down certain theological routes that they were uncomfortable with. Um, just shift that perspective, and I think that would change a lot. For at least in my personal opinion, I want to know your thoughts, though.
Yeah, in terms of what you mean, what could white Christians learn from the Black church?
Yeah.
Uh, the number one thing is to love your neighbor as yourself. And yourself means, like, for instance, like understanding your, if you have, say, a child that's been hit by a car, right? Or you have a neighbor or a friend. I don't want to say a child, that's really a wrong analogy. But if you have a neighbor or a friend or a co-worker who got sick with COVID or something, right? Or got hit by a car or something, what you do is you don't expect them to, um, tough luck. You just pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and get your job done. You make accommodations that are appropriate. You show the for the situation, and you show caring for the other person. White people, white Christians in particular, really tend to focus on individualism too much, and it, this reflects in the engagement of with Black Christians is that they pick out
Oh,
what you like. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, they pick out parts you
your
like.
screen went black and your audio went weird for a second.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was a. What time is it? It's yeah. I think it's almost time to go. I think that might have been my alarm for 2:45, but I've got a few more minutes because it doesn't take too long to get there.
okay.
But the one thing is to care. Look at your own communities, see all the things that you're willing to do there, and look at this and go to Black communities and do the same thing. I mean, fight against redlining, against discriminatory bank loans. Learn about what's going on with Black Christians from them, and not from these sort of mouthpieces like Candace Owens that agree with everything that the uh, right wing of politics say. You know, Vadi Bakum was one on the religious side. Clarence Thomas is on the judicial. Thomas Sowell in economics. But go to the mainstream Black community and listen, and do your own research to validate what's going on instead of being in denial, and understand that including others doesn't take away from you.
Mm,
This is one thing that white Christians really completely fail to grasp. I mean, completely fail as a whole, is that they fought against uh, abolition. Then when, hold on a second.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna get. I'm almost done. A few minutes. Yeah, yeah. Hey, just a couple minutes. I'll be almost done. Okay. Okay. Right. But what happened was that when abolition happened, it it was the greatest um, economic boom, uh, relatively speaking, in U.S. history. The same thing happened when women were allowed to have more responsible jobs, and also when the Civil Rights Act passed. You know, these were economic booms that happened, and what happened was that everyone had a, they perceived uh, that the pie was shrinking. They have less of the pie, but the fact is, it wasn't. You might have had a less, instead of having a monopoly on pie. You might have had 75% or 40%, but the pie was 5 times the size, right? So you actually have
Mm,
more pie than you had before, even though it's a smaller slice. And that's the back to the Black church, in Africa, like the African community, like the communal way of living, of realizing that when all of us succeed, then all of us succeed better, right? But when if we look at life as a zero-sum game, then we're going to lose as well.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I know Paul says, right, if you show one part of the body dishonor, all are dishonored, and if you show the other part honor, then all are honored and all can celebrate. I think that's a great way to end it, right? We're supposed to be in unity, so let's be in unity. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to interview with me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. You too, brother. God bless you, and I pray that He really continues to lead and guide you in your life, and to use this ministry that you have for His glory.
Thank you. Thank you. Same to you. I'll make sure links to Robert Ash's Facebook and other things will be in the description. YouTube channel as well, The Thinker's Bible. Make sure you go check that out. But again, thank you so much for coming, and I pray you have a blessed day.